Hello and welcome to my Legends and Legacy show. I am Breda McKeag. I have always been fascinated by inspirational people around the world, and now I am able to bring them directly to you. So listen, learn and get inspired. And welcome back to my Legacy and Legends series. Today I have an amazing guest for you all. You are going to be blown away by this. She is a trailblazer, she is an author, she is a speaker, and she's a military veteran in the United States Army. She recently shared a virtual stage with Michelle Obama, nonetheless, and she was one of the first women to fly the Apache attack helicopter. She was also Top Gun as platoon leader in an Apache gunnery. And without further ado, I want to introduce you to Shannon Polson. Shannon, you are so welcome to my show.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm so grateful to be here.
I'm so delighted that Shannon is with us today because I look for inspirational people all around the world. And the reason I am doing these interviews is so that I can bring some of that inspiration that I'm finding to others also around the world, because I think inspiration is what breeds inspiration. And if you're not finding people near around you, maybe in lockdown situations or in your physical space right now, then there is any amount of them online, and Shannon is definitely one of them. So Shannon, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, it's great to be with you. I have only a little bit of Irish in me, but I would like to claim much more. So I look forward to the chance to visit. But I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska, which is obviously our far northwestern state in the United States, and went from there to Duke University, studied English at university, and was also part of what we called the ROTC program, which is our Reserve Officer Training Corps program to help to pay for college. And after college, I went into the active duty military, and I was one of the first women to fly the Apache helicopter. I served on 3 continents, leading 3 different line units. And then I transitioned through my MBA at the Tech School at Dartmouth, and then went on to lead outstanding teams in the corporate world, as well in the medical device and the technology industries, and most recently at Microsoft. I left to write my first book, North of Hope. And the second book, of course, came out last September. It's called The Grit Factor: Courage, Resilience, and Leadership in the Most Male-Dominated Organization in the World. And I'm excited to share some of that with you today.
And I see some of the copies right behind you there. And I know that you're willing to do signed copies. I've seen that mentioned on your LinkedIn as well. And by the way, everybody, Shannon is brilliant on LinkedIn. And we were introduced by a mutual friend. And ever since we have, thank you, Eduardo, by the way, for introducing us to, because this girl feels like my lost twin sister or something, because both of us have been military officers in our past. And we have probably had quite similar lives and journeys in many ways. So it's just amazing to have you here, Shannon. And I think everybody should have a look at what you do on LinkedIn, because you're really, really good and very active on it.
Well, thank you. It's a great platform to network and to spend time with other people who are looking to continually learn and improve.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So we call this the Legends and Legacy show. And I think you're a total legend. And I'm very interested in legacy. So where did the Shannon that we see before us and that life journey, where did that all start? Tell us a bit about you when you were a kid. What were you like as a kid, or what were you dreaming about when you were a kid? Because I think a lot of what really sparks us is actually things that we found when we were younger, and then adulthood came along and society came along and made us sort of forget about those things and try and fit into a box. So I'm very interested to see what you were like as a kid.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska. And so growing up in Alaska by itself, I think, is a pretty unique experience. There's definitely an element of adventure in most things that you do. You don't go for a drive in the winter without candles and boots and coats in the back of the car, because if you go off the road, you may or may not ever see somebody in the midst of all of the snowy, cold temperatures. So there was definitely an element of adventure to my growing up in the mountains of Alaska. We used to say that Alaska is where men are men and where women win the Iditarod. There are several women that have won the Iditarod as well. So there's this sense of, I think, gender equity in a pretty interesting way, just by virtue of growing up in this place where everybody has got to pitch in and do their part. But I was pretty athletic. I was a swimmer, actually. Swimming was my primary sport. I did some running and some skiing as well, and nothing with balls, unfortunately. I'm not much good with anything on the on any kind of a field. But swimming, running, and skiing were the big sports. I was a piano player. I also played the flute, the clarinet, and the cello. So music was a really big part of my life as well, and faith and my church was a really big part of my life. So those were all places where I felt like things really resonated for me. And it's interesting that you asked this question, because I also believe this, and the depth psychology would support that what we think that we might be when we're young and like kind of prepubescent, right, before the ego kicks in and you start to be aware of everyone else in the world, really does indicate something very profoundly important about you. And I went back and looked at my little book that I was assigned in 7th grade, I think that probably means I was like 11 or 12 or something like that. And I wanted to be a writer and an artist. And certainly, again, like the adventure comes in from growing up in Alaska, but now I'm writing and I'm having a chance to speak, and I'm doing some art on my own. I'm not sharing that out in the world quite yet. But I've come back to that. And it has been this windy road, but I don't think that's a bad thing. I think you gather those life experiences and then you put them back in order as you get to the middle part of your life.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I think the important thing is that you get back to them. And that's what worries me. I see so many people just going off down such a predictable route. And they tell me things like, I used to play music, or I used to write, or I used to do art.
Right.
And that always makes me suspicious that that's the things that those people were automatically drawn to do, and they were naturally talented at. But yet life has taken them on another path and they're letting that happen. So I love to try and do sort of catalyst work there with them in coaching and different things to see, can I sort of, probe that a little bit for them, because I've seen your art, by the way. And I've seen some really good stuff. It's really cool. I liked it.
It's coming along. But I love that you're doing that, Rita, because it's so important to understand that each one of us is put here to contribute to this world in a meaningful way, right? And going back to those places, I love that you're doing that work with your clients, because that really does help you say, like, how am I supposed to show up in this world? What am I meant to contribute in a meaningful way? We have a very short time, and it's a very precious time, and you want to make sure that you use it well.
Yeah, and it's about purpose. I just think that when you find your purpose, then everything changes, and you're naturally good at something. Every one of us is naturally good at something. Mine is not art, by the way. Mine was always music, and I love business and strategy and leadership. That's the sort of stuff I love. And I'm starting to do more and more of it. And I just think when I see people getting back to the things that they loved initially, it just reignites your spark. And as you say,
absolutely.
And like, we're only here once, so let's get it into a place where we are actually feeling alive. Like, that would be good.
Yes. Well, and that, I will say, like, that absolutely informed the writing of the Grit Factor, because that leadership component was absolutely part and parcel of sports and running the literary magazine and leading the debate team and all of those things that you do as a kid, or that I did as a kid, right? That were all leadership roles, and saying, okay, now that I've had this life experience, how do I take this and offer this to somebody else? And that was also not just my own experience, but going out and interviewing other leaders in the vanguards of their fields. They happen to be women, they happen to be military, but there's general officers across the services, and there are aviators across the generations from World War II to the present. And taking those stories and those lessons learned, and then the tactical takeaways of how you go back and really connect to what matters most. But then, it's connecting to your story, it's engaging in the present, and then it's looking to the future with that foundation, with that engagement in a really, really meaningful way. So that's why really writing and then offering the Grit Factor out into the world, the work that I do as a keynote speaker, the work as I do as a leadership facilitator, really is informed by every single piece of that. So I love that you see that holistic picture as well.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, life experience is an expensive thing to have if we think about it, because you can only really get it with age. So, that kind of valuable material has to be collated and shared to help others, which is exactly what you've done in your book. So I think if we see it like that, it's a very fast way to see wisdom and life experiences that have happened so many women, and leaders and all of the
Yeah.
lessons that come out of there. I mean, that's so valuable. So I think everybody should go and get their copy of The Grit Factor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I'll send you a signed sticker, even to Ireland or anywhere that your listeners are in the world.
Yeah, love it.
You can put it in your...
And then when you come to Ireland and it's COVID is over, we get you to do a book signing or something here in Dublin.
Perfect. I love it. Oh, that would be spectacular. I would love that.
Yeah. So I have another question for you, and this is around what were your 3 most standout moments in your career? Because I know you've had many, and I'm just wondering, what were the 3 most standout, proud moments for you in your career?
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I've had this windy road of a career. I know that's true for probably a number of your listeners as well, but really this deep, this absolutely full-on engagement in the military for most of my 20s, transitioning through business school and then spending time in the corporate world as well, and now back on the stage. And so I'm going to pick not those specific pivot points because those are obvious. You can read them on my LinkedIn profile or my resume, right? But I will say number 1 is remembering back to a time, and this isn't even in the cockpit, right? This isn't even doing the cool, sexy stuff in the Apache. But when you are a leader in the military, as you know, you're responsible not just for flying the missions and planning the missions and doing all that cool stuff that people get to see in the movies here and there, but you're responsible for taking care of your people. And the piece of the slice of this 8-year period of active duty on 3 different continents that I would pull from is actually being stationed in Korea and having a very young soldier, so one of my crew chiefs, one of the most junior crew chiefs, who was in Korea and had his grandmother die. And he had grown up with his grandmother, not with his parents. And so the Army regulations didn't permit him to go back to the States for her funeral. And I remember doing everything that I could within those regulations and a little bit outside of those regulations to make sure that we could drive him to 2 hours to the airport in Seoul, to fly him back to the US for this funeral, and then to be able to bring him back. And the reason that resonates more than the flights and more than the missions and more than all of that is because taking care of your people, at the end of the day, leadership is about taking care of your people. And the opportunity to do that kind of service for somebody that worked for me was an incredible honor. So that's number 1. Yeah. Number 2, I would say I don't know if I would make the pivot specifically. Well, I have a similar experience actually at Microsoft. And maybe what I'll do is tell an experience where somebody took care of me at Microsoft. And my first book is called North of Hope. It's a much more personal book than The Grit Factor. It's a memoir about a trip that I took in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in the far northeast corner of Alaska, as far north as you can go without running into ice, and actually not as much ice anymore, unfortunately. But my father and my stepmother had been killed by a grizzly bear when I had been at Microsoft only 6 months. And I heard the news from a phone call from the police. They had been camping out in the Arctic on this kayak trip on their 16th anniversary. And I remember I had just started at Microsoft, really just 6 months before. And my boss, I remember him saying, listen, you take as much time as you need. If you want to come back to work next week, that's fine. If you want to come back in 3 months, that's fine. Your job is still here. You'll still get a paycheck. You go do whatever you need to do. And, at the time it was losing a household, right? And it was losing, and you need to pack up this home where I had grown up. And I needed to take those 3 months actually. Yeah. And that, again, going back to taking care of your people, more than running an international project, right, that spanned the globe, which was a big part of what I did well at Microsoft. It was both the chance to take care of somebody and then the chance to see that kind of leadership of somebody taking care of me when I needed it the most and when I couldn't really even ask for it. So those are 2 pieces. So maybe this is a little bit of a strange way to answer your question, but I think it comes back to people. And then the third is coming back to what I love to do.
Yeah.
What's that now?
I love it. And I loved that you used the word honor. You said there, the honor of leadership. And that is so what leadership is. And unfortunately, we don't have enough leaders that see it like that. It is all about people. It's about looking after your people and then looking after yourself. You said there, that, you needed the 3 months. You weren't probably sure if you were going to take it, but the fact that you did, you need to look after yourself. It's very important for leaders, especially these days, that they're not just looking after others, but they're also doing what they need to do to keep themselves right. And, without you being right as a leader, your team are sort of left high and dry. So self-care is important in leadership. Sorry.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, no, and I was going to say, just taking it forward is continuing to iterate on knowing that I needed to do work that was true to who I was. And at various points, I was doing good work with good people in good places, but I just had this sense that I wasn't where I was supposed to be. And continuing to explore that, and to your point earlier, I think it's very easy to just say, hey, this is just what I'm doing now. I ended up in this role at this company, and that's just sort of how it is. But even if it's a good role at a good company with good people, you need to be doing something that is truly how you're most meant to contribute in the world. And that can be a very scary step to take, but it's such an important and exciting step. And it's also, again, where you're able to most give back to that idea of legacy, because I think it is about legacy. It's about living into who it is that we're meant to be. So I really do feel incredibly blessed that I've come into this world of writing and speaking and spending time with my family and doing my art as well on the side. But it really is a place where I feel like I've been looking for my whole life. And I'm really grateful to have finally come to find that place.
Yeah. You have a phenomenal story, I think, Shannon. And I love the way you see the world, and you're using all of your life experiences, and some of them were not easy by the sounds of it, but you're using them in a way now that you can help the world, because many others are going to run into issues in their life too, and we need more Shannons in the world to inspire everybody.
Well, and so the other thing that I would love to just bring up, because it's been a huge part of my life over the last 5 years, is taking all of that life experience. We moved out to this very small town in the country in Washington State about 7 years ago, and we realized we had no public space out here, and there was a huge amount of poverty. There's a huge amount of inequity. And so for the past 5 years, I founded a board. We have been working to raise money to build a new public library, which for us is really the opportunity to equalize opportunity, to equalize access to technology and to information. And I realized that I could do that because I had this unusual kind of potpourri of life experience. And I could do operations, I could do marketing, I could do fundraising. And so that's really been this incredible volunteer focus for me, but also this opportunity. And to the point of legacy, I think my children see this huge effort towards, hey, we're putting our time, our financial support behind this effort for this community that's going to change the trajectory for this community forever. And that is really about legacy. How can you best give back with the skills that you have? And it's work that is an honor to do. And I'm grateful because it's a legacy for our community, but it's also a legacy because my children are part of this and they see this and they are internalizing this service component as well. We all have to be part of giving back, and it is an honor to do that.
Yeah, and you mentioned legacy there a few times. I think philanthropy is a massive piece of legacy. I mean, I don't know of any legacy that is as good as a philanthropist's legacy. And I've been looking around for a long time to see what kind of legacy do I want. I mean, if you can change the world for others, there is no comparison. And I don't see any other way of doing that. Yes, we can do that via our careers and via sharing our information. We can write, we can do talks, we can do all that as well. But I think what you're doing with the community piece is massive. And like, you've set all that up, and I can just imagine how instrumental you are in all of that. And that is what I want people to see today, to use that example that you're setting out for them, to see what they could do is of a similar nature. Because in every community, you've got inequity and you've got poverty, and in every country. So, I mean, if Shannon can do it, we all can do it.
No, for sure. And you're going to run into people, and I continue to, although much less now that we're actually building, then things are underway. But for those first few years, I cannot tell you how many people basically said, who do you think you are? Why do you think you can do this? And you've really got to put blinders on and focus on the goal, do what needs to get done, pull in those resources that are necessary to get it done, and just stay focused on that goal, because change is hard for people. Really going out and stretching yourself is hard for people, but that's where the real magic happens, right? And you just got to block out those people who say, who do you are? Because the world will always ask you that, right? And just go out there and make a difference.
Yeah. So the magic glitter of life is in getting out of those comfort zones. And I think, like you mentioned there, a lot of people were saying to you, why would you do that? And who do you think you are? I think those are the fixed mindsets, showing themselves.
Yes.
And they're the victim mindsets that are obviously so far away from where your growth mindset is that they couldn't even imagine doing things like that just to help others. So, I mean, there's so much to be learned, I think, for everybody from your story, from the example that you're setting there. And I'm hoping that whoever's watching this starts to really think about that for themselves. Because I think without introspection and without really, truly analyzing how you're reacting to things like that, or how you think about things like that, then you're not really going to discover that you've got this maybe victim mindset. And then how are you going to get better?
Yes, no, it's true. It's absolutely true. You've got to really be able to say, hey, I can continue to do hard things. When I do hard things, I grow. I mean, that's this concept of grit, right? Grit and resilience. And it's something that every single one of us have. And every single one of us can really work on building. And we talk about some of those tactical applications in the Grit Factor, because they're all examples of people who have been willing to push against the people who were the naysayers, right? And say, hey, I'm going to do this thing. I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to soar higher than people have ever said that I could soar. And that's something that is available to every single one of us, but you have to make the decision. And it is a mindset that you choose every single day, but you have to choose it. You have to do that work of making that choice.
Yeah. And mastering your fears is a big piece of that. And I mean, in all of the decisions that you were making when you were starting that journey, and all of your journeys, really, you've had to master fears all of the time. And I think that's a massive hurdle for everyone, because I think we've all been conditioned to have fear about rejection, failure, judgment, fear of change. I mean, mastering fears is a massive one. Now, you obviously have nailed it, but I think it's important to call out for those who are watching this going, why would I even want to do that? So that they can start recognizing that's just their fear talking to them, and fear is keeping them stuck. They're not going to be, flying Apache helicopters like you were if they don't master fears.
Yeah, and it's okay to feel fear. I always tell people, and in my keynotes, this is a big piece of this last year especially, is fear is a normal human emotion, right? I felt fear many, many times while flying, while on the ground, while asking to take a platoon, while asking to take a company. I had to earn and then ask for what I wanted. And that's a really important thing for all of your listeners to really take away from this. And yeah, it is scary. And that's a normal thing to feel. And what I like to say about fear is it's a normal human emotion, but you don't have space for it in your own personal cockpit, right? And you've got to turn towards it and fly directly through it. It's the only way through fear, is to go directly through it.
Yeah. Over it, not under it, just through it. The cockpit of fear. I love that.
That's exactly right. It's too big. You can't go over it or under it. That's right.
I wanted to ask you about the typical male roles, because I've always been in typical male roles as well. And I often see so many women and young girls not even considering the typical male roles. Yet look at you. You've been flying helicopters, you've been in the military, you've been doing all sorts of cool things. And you've had brilliant opportunities out of that and buckets of learning. I have too, out of all of the male-orientated careers I've gone into. And what makes me sad is that there are women out there that are not even getting close to getting those opportunities because they see those careers as something that they wouldn't even consider. What advice would you have for those girls, or how do we get them to start seeing these careers as something they should absolutely be going for?
I mean, I think it's really about understanding what your strengths are, what your interests are, where you're most meant to contribute. And there is no gender that's part of that. There's no sex that's part of that, right? It's about where you best fit and where you're best meant to really put your efforts and your energies. And I would really encourage every single person, no matter who they are, to think that whatever role it is that you are called to do, or that you're called to move towards and educate yourself towards and get experience to be able to work towards, you just work towards whatever it is that you are passionate about, and that you're willing to put the work in for. There's nothing that should be gendered about any of those choices that you're making. And if you don't see as many examples, look a little farther for other people that have done things outside of either their comfort zone or outside of what those norms are. The grit factor will give you lots and lots of those. So acquaint yourself with those and draw strength from those stories, and know that whatever it is, whichever direction you're meant to contribute, is absolutely the direction that you should go.
Yeah, brilliant advice. And I'd add to that what I've seen down through the years is that a lot of the typical male careers, a lot of even the STEM roles, are really well-paid roles. And yet, you know, and we have gender pay gaps in every country that are causing everybody problems. Yes. And so if we can get women to start, I mean, I didn't know anything about the military. I knew nothing about Army. I had no military background. But what happened to me was I just said yes to somebody giving me a call to say, come on, we're going to this thing. We've never, you know, so I think there's a lot of work there for people to stop talking themselves out of things that they don't know anything about, and just take some managed risk.
Absolutely.
Even just to see what happens in those kind of roles, you know, to do something slightly different, to see, can you find something that absolutely ignites the spark in you that you never knew even existed. And I think that's half of the problem, you know, they haven't seen. And there's another saying I love, you can't be what you can't see. I just think, you know, having you on this show is exactly what I want to do. And I want young girls seeing you and hearing you, because that might instill a little bit of curiosity in some of them. Well, I mean, you've been flying Apache helicopters, so, you know, and I'm going to get you to talk about how that feels right now, because I want them to, because it's something I've not done. So if I'm a young girl, you know, I've never done that. So from here, I want you to tell us now about what that experience feels like. Can you remember even the first time you did that? How exhilarating.
Oh my gosh. I remember the first time that I walked out on the flight line, and I had been trained in the Huey helicopter, the UH-1, and then the OH-58, which is a little observation helicopter. And then I was an honor grad at flight school for the Army, and I had I'd earned the opportunity to fly the Apache, and Apaches had only just opened up to women. So this is the 90s. And so there were very, very, very few women who had gone through that transition. And I remember walking out on the flight line in lower Alabama. It was a winter day. Now, Alabama is typically pretty hot compared to Alaska. It's in the southeastern part of the United States, but it was a winter morning. It was chilly. I had my flight jacket zipped all the way up, and I had chills going up and down my spine walking out towards this aircraft. And I just saw it. I saw it crouching there. And it looks sort of like this enormous praying mantis, right? It's 58 feet long. It's 12 feet high. It's 18 feet wide. It's powered by two 1,850 horsepower jet engines. You guys have them too, I know, in the UK. But it's the most technologically advanced helicopter in the world. And as I was walking out on that flight line, looking at that aircraft, you know, tandem seated, all glass cockpit configuration for two pilots, you know, any combination of armaments that can hang off of the wings and underneath the belly, and this sight system on the nose that can see in day and night in adverse conditions. And I remember thinking, who am I to fly this thing? You know, I was an English literature major in college and university. And in that moment, on the tarmac, on that winter morning, I had to decide to make a decision. I had to decide to be better than any of the doubts that I was feeling myself, than any of the doubts that I had heard expressed around me about why women think they need to fly this thing anyway. Right there on the tarmac in that moment, I had to decide to take control of my own story. I had to decide to own my own narrative, because who was I not to fly that aircraft? So I put one foot up onto the wheel, the other foot up onto the forward avionics bay. I opened that all glass cockpit, and I swung myself into that front seat, attached the 5-point harness, and began that run-up procedure that I would know so well that I would know it by heart, but I would always use the checklist. And then I remember we taxi out towards takeoff. And I always ask my live audiences, which way do you take off in the Apache helicopter? They always say up, usually. Well, the spoiler is, of course, you were meant to go up. But in the Apache, like in any other aircraft, you turn that nose to face the wind. And when you face the wind and you use it the right way, that resistance will help you to rise. Remember, the resistance helps you rise. And it's a phenomenal feeling flying the Apache. I've always had this inclination to want to do those things that I have been told that I couldn't do. I don't know what it is about me, but they say that young women are often conditioned to do very well in school because they follow the rules. But then about the time that you hit puberty, the rules start to change, and it's not about following the rules anymore, but that's what the little girls are really, really good at, right? Meanwhile, the little boys are out there swinging from the treetops. And you've got to get out there and swing from the treetops and experience life and risk. I mean, every leader understands that risk is part of that journey to success, that failure is part of that journey to success. And the whole key is that every time you fall, you've just got to get back up one more time than you fall, right? Everybody fails. And it's not failure that matters. It's what you do with it that counts.
Wow. I am so excited. I want to get into the cockpit.
Great. Like, I take you there in the red factor. There you go.
That is a brilliant description. I love that. And it felt so real. And that is exactly what I wanted for any young people, or even if we've got adults watching this, show your young people this, please. You said when you're facing the Apache into the wind, that resistance helps you rise. And I think that could be my new mantra for life.
Yes. Yeah, it's my favorite metaphor. I use it every single time I talk to an audience because I think we can all relate to that, right? If you use it the right way, those things that seem like they're impossible will actually help you to surmount them. I mean, that resistance, it helps you to rise. And this is true no matter how advanced you are in your career. Anytime you're making a change, anytime you're facing a challenge or an obstacle, it's the same thing, not just for young people, but for people at every single stage of their careers, women and men, right? Yes. Face that resistance and fly directly through it.
Yeah. So when they tell you not to do it, do exactly that.
That's right. There you go. Yeah. I mean, within bounds, of course. Yeah. Some of those things are meant to keep you healthy.
I was listening to Elon Musk's mother very recently on a podcast, and she said, live dangerously, carefully. And I love that because,
there you go.
I mean, without you taking a bit of risk and without you doing things that you haven't done before, how on earth are you going to be getting a legacy for yourself? You're really not. So I think it's about people thinking about these things and asking themselves, how are they taking risk? Are they taking risk? Are they afraid of risk? Where are they sitting with it? Because you do realize eventually that you have to take risks if you want to change things up for yourself. And life is full of risk. And it's not about hiding from it or, avoiding it. It's really about adapting to it and seeing where you can find opportunities within it, really. So
Yes, absolutely. And trying new things, right? Being curious, constantly trying to learn. We talk about the values that my husband and I want for our boys, and we talk about courage and compassion and curiosity, right? Like you've got to constantly be learning and pushing yourself to grow and be better and learn and then be compassionate towards others, and then be willing to be courageous when you need to be courageous. And that means standing up for others when others aren't standing up for them, right? It means doing the right thing even when everybody else is doing the wrong thing or they're not supporting it. Yeah. And it means taking risks and really pushing yourself more and more each day.
And that is super advice for anybody watching that's a parent, because is that the way you are rearing your kids? And so many of us default parent, and that's like they're doing the opposite of what you've just described there. And I see a lot of kids, like we're all curious when we're kids and we are very creative and we've fabulous imaginations. And then I watch society and adults knock that out of kids and try and get them to fit into one of society's boxes. And that's where they lose that whole spark, and that curiosity that you talk about is something that needs to be nurtured. And it's something very precious. And I see society really taking those natural abilities away from people as they grow up. And so our message today,
absolutely,
to all the parents and anybody who can influence young people, whether you're a teacher or whatever you are, but think about what Shannon's just said, courage.
And I will say, like, we do some things that are hard and that are also very potentially contentious. Like, we don't allow our children to play video games. We really limit their screen time. I mean, all of that, if you do any of the research at all, it's very clear that that limits their creativity, that limits their sense of self-worth. It limits what they understand they can do in the world. And so you've really got to go against the grain, both for yourself and for your children, to say, how do we best interact with this world, and how do we show compassion, and how are we courageous? It's not by just plugging into whatever is marketed to you, right? It just isn't. It absolutely is going to be the opposite of that. And so we make some hard decisions that require some difficult challenges in parenting, but I think it's been worth it for our family. And I think for each of us, as we take on those challenges for ourselves, don't default ever. Never default. You always want to push yourself to do the harder thing, to have that deeper engagement with this world. And I will say technology takes away from that tremendously in many cases.
Yeah, brilliant advice. I think you're going to have to write a parenting book next, by the way.
Oh, a helicopter parent, right? How to helicopter parent wisely.
Why not? So I want to ask you now about the best pieces of advice you've ever had in your career, or maybe, like, for me, it was quotes that really changed me up. But was it quotes for you, or was there advice that you got at some time that kind of put you on a different direction or pushed you harder or something? What was it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm just going to think of a couple little pieces at different places. And it depends, of course, on where you are in your career, and maybe you've made a career change. And so some of these will apply at these different times. I remember when I was flying instruments at flight school, the instrument instructor said, listen, if you just go home every night and you do 20 minutes a night, that's it. It's consistency, right? You study consistently 20 minutes a night, you will know more about instruments than anybody you ever come across. So there's a consistency aspect to that application. It's not just kind of jamming for the test, but it's like, how do I consistently learn and improve? Consistently, not hours a day, 20 minutes a day, right? 20 minutes a day. The second piece of advice, which I think was really important, was in an internship that I had at a medical device company after business school. And that advice came from one of the most senior women at the company. And she said, it's not the job that you do that matters the most, it's who you work for. So you make sure that you are working for somebody who is going to challenge you, who is going to be an advocate for you, who is going to suggest you for new roles, and you want to find the right person to work for, right? More, if the job is a rotten job, if you're working for a great boss, that boss is going to be somebody that can help you to maneuver and to grow in your career. And I think that's a really important thing to remember, because a lot of us think, oh, I want to do that, and I'm just going to apply for that job. It's like, no, go work for that person. Figure out who that person is that you want to work for. So I think those two pieces of advice were really important. And then the last thing I'm going to say is something I've been offering to people who are generally people early in their careers lately, who have been asking for advice. And people tend to hop around a lot now, right? They don't stick with things very well. And that's okay. I mean, it's okay that we don't sign up at 21 to work for a company and work for that company for 40 years. But at the same time, what I tell these people is stay long enough in a job. Don't just leave because you don't like your boss or you don't like the job or you're working more hours than you thought you were. Stay long enough to learn something significant and stay long enough to contribute something significant. And then if you decide at that point that there's not a good path forward, then fine, then look in another direction. But stay long enough to learn something significant and to contribute something significant. Remember, it's about contributing. It's not about what you get. It's about what you give. And when you think of it that way, in that contribution sense, that's when it all comes back for you anyway. So,
well, there are some beautiful pieces of advice. And those are really good takeaways, Shannon. So anybody listening to that, I hope you were writing that down. Because I want to see people using these things. There's no point in us telling them if they're not starting to put some of it into practice. So think all of those bits of advice through and see where you can apply some of that in your life or your career. And my last question for you, Shannon, is around who inspires Shannon? Because I think I've learned the importance of having people to look up to careers that I can watch and see. Because, I mean, we're all quite limited. We've our own imaginations, our own creativity, absolutely. But when you see what others do, you get so many other ideas. And I just think it helps you to ideate by yourself and brainstorm by yourself. A lot of people are having to do that now in lockdowns. So who is it that makes you feel inspired and that you would love to do something like what they're doing? Is there anybody in the world that does that for you?
I mean, gosh, there's a lot. I would say like Brene Brown. I love her work. I love the way that she presents herself in the world. I think she's very real and very much who she is, and seems to have a really good balance with her family and her work, which I will say is, I think, a very important piece of that for me, because again, life is short and it's the relationships and the people that you love that matter, right? As well as what you do in the world. And I think she has left a legacy. So, Brene Brown would be one of those people for me, for sure.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I have a few of them I'm going to share as well, so that I'm hoping that not only have we given them advice to take away, but some names to go and look up. So I would often think Oprah is amazing and her story is phenomenal. And I know lots of people love Oprah, but have you listened to her properly? Have you tested your own thinking against some of her total nuggets of wisdom? And what are you doing to try and be an Oprah in your life? And the other people that inspire me is Marissa Peer. If you've ever come across her, she is amazing. She's in the UK. I listen to a lot of Marissa Peer and Tony Robbins, and then Graham Norton, because he is so funny. And I think fun and humor is a great way for people to learn. So if we can amalgamate all of those and put some fun in there, I think people might learn some of this easy and enjoy it.
Yeah, and I will say the other thing, Rita, is that as I was doing the work for the Grit Factor, every single one of these incredible leaders that I had a chance to talk to, and I'm continuing this work forward for the next book right now, I am inspired every day by every single one of them. And I didn't have a chance when I was serving to know a lot of women who were serving. And I did have a chance to know some excellent leaders. They were always men. But I am inspired by every single one of them. And I'm inspired right now by some of the stories of these, like a single mom getting through COVID by herself, like helping to teach her kid. So I like finding those sources of inspiration as well. Just looking around, because there's so much everyday heroism in what's happening also. But it is important, as you're saying, to really say, hey, where do I want to take this career? Who is somebody that has taken a career in the direction that I'd like to go? And but don't ever limit yourself, and allow yourself to be inspired by the people around you as well, because it's all about us loving each other.
Yeah. Oh, Shannon. I wish we were in the same country. We would be doing hugs right now.
Yeah, I know.
I think the world is a better place because I now know you're in it. So you've been a phenomenal guest on my show. I've loved everything that you said. I thank you for your time and all of those nuggets. I hope everybody listening puts them to good use. And if you're watching this, please share and subscribe and like. And then go and have a look at Shannon's website. What's your website again?
So I'm at shannonpolson.com, as well as thegritinstitute.com. And I'd love to see you in both of those places, LinkedIn and Twitter as well.
Yeah. And I know that you're very happy to reach out and to have a conversation with anyone that DMs you, because I was one of them.
That's right.
And
I love it.
You're a phenomenal speaker. You're a superwoman at describing and making us feel like we are with you in that cockpit. So keep doing what you're doing, Shannon. I wish you the best. And thank you so much again for joining me on the show.
Thank you. It's been an honor to be with you.